Welcome, I'm Rhiannon. I couldn't wait to jump onto YouTube today. I've been really wanting to talk to you about 3 books that I've been reading all summer that I've just adored. I'm not usually a trilogy girl, I have to say. I normally read books that stand alone. But in this case, I have been absolutely sold on these books. They are Bernard Cornwell, who needs no introduction. Bernard Cornwell's The Warlord Chronicles. There are 3 books: The Winter King, The Enemy of God, and the 3rd one, Excalibur. And they are set in 6th century Britain, and they are about the history and the myths and legends of Arthurian Britain. So they are, in a sense, historical books, and also Bernard Cornwell uses the myths and legends of that era that we know and that exist in oral and historical folk tales about King Arthur. If you enjoyed the Netflix series The Last Kingdom, which was based on again a series of books by Cornwell about Uhtred the Warlord, these could be the books for you. Similarly, if you're a Game of Thrones fan, these absolutely could be the books for you. They're this mix of history and kind of solid reality and magic over the top, and it's just fizzingly compelling. Apparently there's a film coming out. I rather suspect it's been delayed because of COVID. I don't know when it will be out. My money's being called Excalibur, but let's see. Like the Uhtred books, the Warlord Chronicles are written in the first person. We have one narrator, who's Derval Cadern, who, like Uhtred in the Uhtred books, Derval is recounting the story of his life. Now, Derval Cadern, as far as we know, seems to have been his historic figure. He became a monk and later a saint, so he has a saint's day, and he seems to have been a knight of King Arthur's, if you wish, or one of King Arthur, one of the warlord leaders around the time of King Arthur, and apparently he retired into the priesthood after the defeat at Arthur's last battle, the Battle of Camlan. So that's the narrator. The stories are based on the idea that we have this Brythonic culture, this culture of the Britons, which is so essentially, I suppose you might say, holding out against the incoming Anglo-Saxons from the east. So most of the action takes place in modern-day Wales, Cornwall, perhaps into Devon, Dorset a little bit, and down into Armorica, which is modern-day Brittany. So King Arthur and his bands are trying to hold back these incoming Saxons. We also have this idea of tension between the Druidic religions of the Britons and the incoming foreign faith of Christianity, which Cornwell imagines, and which of course also creates tension in the stories. The book starts with a storm and fantastic tension and the birth of the baby Mordred, who is born with bad omens and actually has a clubbed foot, and he is the son of Pendragon, and he's to be king, and we know straight away, because we know our stories, that he is the baddie, so it doesn't look good for Mordred from day one. And the 3 books go right up to Arthur's final battle, when we know he's fatally wounded by Mordred at Camlan, and then Excalibur is disposed of to come back, hopefully, at some point to save Britain. So there's the whole narrative of saving Britain going on. all the old characters that you know are there. So we've got Lancelot, Galahad, Guinevere, Merlin the Wizard, or Merlin in Welsh. He has different names in Cornwall and Briton. Who else have we got? We've got Nimue the Witch, we've got Gawain. So all these people that we know. Now, what Cornwall is really, really brilliant at doing is giving these characters a fresh spin. Lancelot, we know or suspect was the character of Lancelot was introduced much later by a French interpretation of the legends. Now, what Cornwall does is he has Lancelot and his half-brother Galahad as French princes, and they come from Innistribes, which many of you will know or have visited as modern Mont Saint-Michel in France. And this kingdom is defeated by the Franks. I won't go into details because I don't want to spoil it, but these two young men, Lancelot and Galahad, essentially come as exiles to modern Britain, to Britain, not modern Britain, to Arthur's Britain. And Lancelot is a very handsome, if you want in modern terms, very pretty Frenchman, but he's also a bit of a fraud in that he claims credit for all these battles and pays bards to write about his victories. But those, we kind of get a bad vibe about Lancelot. Guinevere is much more interesting. How Cornwall plays with her character and how she denies the fact that she was a loose woman, to put it politely. And there's a wonderful passage which is essentially would be recognised by modern feminists. Maybe it's a bit anachronistic, but it was very powerful, whereby she says, well, I'm a woman. I'm disenfranchised. I'm cleverer than the men and I'm more capable than the men. And actually, she was in the story. If I were a man, things would be much better. But I haven't got the power levers that men have. So I have to resort to religion and magic and backstage machinations. And this story is a man's story because it's told from the point of view of Devil Cadern, who's this aging monk who was a great, in the story, a great warrior. So there's lots of battles and men's politicking and the negotiation. But interestingly, when the crucial moments come that make the decisive changes to the course of the history in the story, it's the women that cause those changes. Guinevere in one situation, and Nimue, or the Lady of the Lake, or Vivian, in the latter half of the book. So watch this space for the women. Merlin, the character of Merlin, I can't wait to see who they cast as the character of Merlin if they make a film. He is eccentric, mad, like Merlin the Wild in the Welsh mythology. He is contradictory, he's enigmatic, he's a bit bonkers really, and he's hilarious, yet really quite dark as well. So he's a wonderful, wonderful mix. And of course there's the magic of this cauldron and the magic of Excalibur going on all the time. I just love these books, and I thought Cornwell was a fantastic narrator. He had complete control of the pacing. So you'd have the excitement, then you'd have a quiet bit, then you'd have another excitement. He had total mastery of that. He was self-aware. So he's writing in the tradition that goes right back to the ancient bards of Britain, like Taliesin. And he introduces Taliesin, this famous bard, 6th century bard, as a character in the story. And I think, you know, although we're reading these stories perhaps on an aeroplane, or we're listening on audio, or we're reading them electronically. Essentially, we're doing what our ancient ancestors did when we read these stories, which is sit around the campfire, the fire in the evenings, and enjoy a jolly good yarn. And there's a wonderful scene where Queen Guinevere is having a discussion with the poet, the bard, the druid Taliesin in the story, and they're discussing about the purity of poetry and the meter and the form and da-di-da-di-da. And I can't remember which one it says. I think it's Guinevere. She says, well, what does that matter if it's not absolutely, you know, the meter doesn't scan. What does it matter? People don't care. What they want is a jolly good yarn. And similarly, when Derval Cadan is reading what he's written to his patron who's sponsoring him to write this work, and she's saying, but that's not true. That's not what other people are saying. And history, it's all about interpretation. And Derval Cadan says, well, you can believe what you want, but I was there, so my version's the true one. It's fabulous. Not only was the story a jolly good yarn, but it also can be quite educational. I found myself going off to look up bits of history or bits of mythology to see what we know about the facts of Dark Age Britain and these Brythonic cultures. And this Brythonic Celtic culture, it still exists today. It's still there. If you go to Wales, if you go to parts of Cornwall or Brittany, and you want to feel it, you want to find it, you want to speak it even, and have a channel of communication, you can still do it. I would highly recommend these books. They are just magic, just superb. So if you do read them and you want to comment, you want feedback, I'd love to hear from you. And don't forget, if you enjoy my kind of chats, ramblings, don't forget to subscribe. Take care.